Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. So today we're going to be looking at the 2018 Senate elections based off the 2006 election results, the last time there was a Democratic wave year in a midterm election. So if you don't care, then okay. But pretty much I just want to do this video because I thought it would be interesting. I mean, the last time we had a Democratic wave year was 2006. I mean, in terms of midterm elections, because 2008 I would consider a Democratic wave year, along with 2012, but a very minor one in 2012. But for right now, we're just looking at the Senate map, and it's actually going to be pretty interesting, considering that the composition is not the same, and it's actually just as contested as it was back in 2006. It just seems like the Democrats got very lucky back then, but we're going to see that exact same map on here, but obviously the composition won't be the same because what we're looking at now are the other 60 seats that weren't up for re-election. The other 65 seats actually that weren't up for re-election in this midterm election year. So right now we have 23 Democrats and 42 Republicans. We will be doing this in alphabetical order, starting off with the state of Arizona. So pretty much the state of Arizona goes pretty solidly into the Republican column, but it's going to be a likely state. I'm going to do pretty much tilt is less than 1%, and then 1 to 5% will be in the leaning column, and then 5 to 15% will be in the likely column. I believe I meant to say the leaning column was 1 to 5% if I didn't say it, and then the safe column will be more than 15% because that's pretty much out of any possibility of it overturning. Then we can go over to California, which is already going to go to the Democrats, and it's the same exact candidate here. Dianne Feinstein wins her election with 59% in 2006, and that's likely the same amount she will get here. But there are only two candidates on the ballot now, and they're both Democrats, so that one pretty much doesn't really matter that much. Over in Connecticut, that one actually goes to I guess the Democrats because Lieberman did choose to caucus with the Democrats after that. So Connecticut goes into the narrow likely side for the Democrats because it was a win by exactly 10%. Over in Delaware, Tom Carper, who's also up for re-election this year, many of them are staying in office. He wins by over 15%, an easy win there. Bill Nelson down in Florida wins by over 15%, which is pretty surprising, putting Florida in the safe Democratic column. As for the state of Hawaii, that one overwhelmingly goes to the Democrats as well. Keep in mind, Bill Nelson actually got 60% of the vote in Florida in 2006, so that's very interesting to see those numbers even today. Over in Indiana, the Republican wins here with 87% of the vote. Wow. So that one obviously safe blue state, totally. Then we go over to another state, Maine. That one actually has a Republican there. The Republican wins with 74% of the vote to the Democrats' 20.5. So obviously a huge landslide for the GOP in Maine. Now the second flip actually, Indiana was the first on this map. Maine now flipping towards the GOP. And Ben Cardin, who's actually up for re-election. This is the last time a candidate did pretty well from the GOP in Maryland in a statewide election for the Senate races. So pretty much the the polling numbers here expected this race to be a 3-point margin for the Democrats, but it actually ended up being a 10-point margin. So that goes in the likely column, which is pretty surprising, seeing my home state of Maryland anything but solidly blue, except for the governor's race. Ted Kennedy easily won re-election in Massachusetts. Overwhelmingly goes, not Rhode Island, okay, but Massachusetts goes towards the Democratic Party by a pretty considerable amount. Over in Michigan, Debbie Stabenow, also up for re-election, wins by over 15%, narrowly over 50%, so that one goes into the safe column. Yeah, it's barely over 15% by less than 1%. Over in Minnesota, right here, Amy Klobuchar, I believe this might have been her first time being elected. Yes, it was. And she won by over 15%. So Minnesota and the Minnesota special election both go towards the Democratic Party. As for Mississippi, still a Republican state back then, as it is now, both of these overwhelmingly go to the GOP, both the special and the general election. So this was a gain back in 2006 in the state of Missouri, but probably a hold now. Claire McCaskill wins by around 2%, so that one narrowly goes into the leaning column for the Democratic Party. As for Montana, John Tester did pretty well there. He was able to defeat a Republican incumbent. John Tester wins by less than 1%, so that one actually goes into the tilt Democratic column. Very interesting to see those numbers. Over in Nebraska, this was a pretty solid hold for the Democrats. Pete Ricketts, the current governor, actually, I believe he's a governor, if not a senator. I'm 99% sure he could be the governor or senator. I'm confused now. I just confused myself, but I remember his name from my 2020 election coverage. That was a while ago. Wow. But we're going to get into that in 67 days, so that'll be pretty interesting. Yeah, so 67 days into the midterm elections, but Ben Nelson, a Democratic senator here, overwhelmingly wins re-election. Now Nebraska flipping from the GOP to the Democrats, but he won with 63.9% of the vote. As a Democrat in Nebraska, keep in mind he was that final vote for Obamacare, giving them a total of 60. Over in Nevada, that is a Republican hold, 55% for the GOP, but not quite over 15%, but nearing the 15% margin. As for New Jersey, that one easily goes to Bob Menendez. Not as easy as I think it will in 2018, but pretty much Bob Menendez wins his election there with 53.4%, enough to put it in the likely column. And we can go over to New Mexico, pretty solid of a Democratic state, 70.6% for the Democrat in New Mexico. Very interesting numbers considering it was still a swing state and a Bush state from 2004. In New York, actually, we have an interesting figure here. Hillary Clinton wins re-election, safe for the Democrats for obvious reasons. It was Hillary Clinton. In North Dakota, the Democrat there won with 68.8% of the vote, so another safe Democratic state. These are very crazy numbers. I didn't know how immense of the wins there were here. A Democratic gain against Mike DeWine. Keep in mind, Mike DeWine is running for the governor's race now, but he was a senator, defeated by Sherrod Brown with 56.2% of the vote, not quite 15%, so Ohio goes into the likely Democratic column. As for Pennsylvania, Rick Santorum was defeated, which is not too surprising. Bob Casey wins with 58.7% of the vote, going into the safe column. Considering an incumbent loses by that amount, that's pretty crazy. Lincoln Chafee loses as a Republican, goes on for a Democratic run in 2016. But Sheldon Whitehouse, who's also up for re-election now, wins with a likely margin, narrowly a likely margin. So Rhode Island goes in the likely column. As for Tennessee, so here's where it gets very interesting. The last time there was a Democratic wave year, the Republicans narrowly edged out Tennessee. And I think that's likely, if the Republicans do win, the exact same thing that we're going to see in 2018. So that characterization is not as crazy as Florida being safe blue, or Indiana being safe red, or Maine being safe red. Tennessee is actually very believable for our numbers that we're probably going to see now. Bob Corker winning his first term here and also retiring in another Democratic wave year. Very interesting. As for Texas, Kay Bailey Hutchinson won re-election with 61.7% of the vote here, replaced by Ted Cruz in 2012, now going into the safe column for the GOP. So now they officially have the majority in the United States Senate with 50 seats, with Vice President Mike Pence breaking that tie. But over in Utah, Orrin Hatch wins re-election with 62.6%, so another seat to add to the GOP column. Go ahead and take a look at Vermont. Pretty much an independent hold for Bernie Sanders, but still he caucuses with the Democratic Party regardless. So Bernie Sanders wins in in Vermont with 65.4% of the vote. Jim Webb winning his first term here in the United States Senate by 0.4%. So less than a percentage point. Virginia tilts in the favor of the Democratic Party. In Washington, Maria Cantwell easily wins her election there by over 15%, so going into the safe column for the Democratic Party. As for West Virginia, Robert Byrd easily wins re-election here, over 15%. And then we can go ahead and look at the final two states. Wisconsin, which gave the Democrat here a huge win with 67% of the vote, and then the Republican in Wyoming with 69.99% of the vote there. So that pretty much finishes off our map, and the composition isn't too crazy from where we could expect it in 2018. Pretty much the Democratic Party lost a seat overall, but to see a Democrat in Nebraska, and pretty much this map is very interesting in my opinion, but it's pretty much not that different in terms of numbers. I mean, we currently have 49 to 51, and at the end of 2016, it was 52 to 48. So it's pretty much the exact same composition we would see now. The Democrats actually don't take back the United States Senate in this scenario like they did in 2006. So I guess advantage GOP if the results were the exact same as 2006. So thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.